Oh, sweet. We got the Mozilla AV team. Right? That's what's happening? Is that the streaming through the Discord? I guess. Matt, you will let us know if everything is working correctly on your end whenever you want, whenever you give us the green light. Maybe if you need more time, we can wait for you to finish the setup. Oh, cool. All right. Well, then Matt, do you want the YouTube stream? Do you want to put the link in the chat here so we can monitor if there are any comments, we can see them from too, and we can answer questions as we go. Or I don't know where people will be interacting. If it's on the Discord channel, I have it open on another window. All right, Nick and Matt, you will probably figure this out, and you will let us know if there are any questions you can relay here from the Mozilla channels. Okay, so I'm going to start recording our session and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our new format, well, slightly new format in the sense that we're going to be doing these town halls now weekly, going into the session, going into the final stretch before we have the open source AI definition reviewed and approved by the board at the end of October at the board meeting that we have scheduled then. So a quick reminder of our rules of engagement, our community agreements that we call them. This is our rules. We want to have making sure that there are no overlaps and people keep space for speaking and listening. So take space if you are shy and tend not to speak, but also if you tend to speak a lot, take a break, consider others and ask questions or give space for others to come in and give their own things. Be kind, and the ones that I look always to remind is think about the fact that we want to continue moving. We can't stop discussing and for too long. We need to notice the places where we have disagreement or difficult, complicated issues. Maybe put a note in there and get back to this later. And always look for solutions. Right? Listing the problems is okay to start the conversation, but moving on. And so let's review this is the first time we do this at this time of the week, so you may have not seen the new version that was released a couple of weeks ago, version 0.9. We have presented it in China. I mean, we were in China with Mayor Joyce when this came out, and basically the principles haven't changed between 0.8 and 0.9. the principles are that we want to have, for an open source AI, we want to have three kind of components that can be grouped into three buckets: the weights, the parameters, the architecture, anything that is related to what we call the model in machine learning needs to be made available under needs to be made available. We'll talk about the conditions for openness or availability. The code that we use to train the system needs to be made available also, and also you need to have a way to run the model, run the AI system, and then you need the data, right? Everyone understands and agrees on the fact that the data is where the parameters, the weights come from, and you need the data. And the coalition, the group that has discussed for many months how to pass the big boulder of data being many things in different legislations of the world, came with the description of the data, the requirement of the data as sufficiently detailed information about the data used to train the system, and that includes either the data set itself when it's possible and legally plausible to distribute safely, or in alternative, and also not in alternative, but also the code with the full instructions on how to replicate that data set, and that includes the scripts to download the original data and content, the code to run all the interesting manipulation to go from the raw data to the training data set. And so the definition itself has the text of what is required in a paragraph titled "What is the preferred form to make modifications for a machine learning system," and describes the weights and gives some high-level examples. This is not text that is strictly correct, always valid for every possible, or very strictly prescriptive about every possible system, every possible kind of technology that we can see today or available in the future. These are examples that are useful to interpret the actual meaning of the words above. So for the model weights parameters, that might include the checkpoints. For example, if the training in the system is a large language model, for example. From the code perspective, it's the source code used to train the system. And includes all the pre-processing code, the training, the validation, the testing, how it's been done, the supporting libraries, and all of that code software. And this obviously need to be made available with open source AI approved licenses. And for the data piece, again, this is a little bit more wordy. The intention here is that the open source AI, the developers of open source AI, must be sharing with others all the instructions and all the knowledge that they have on how they built the system. That's the intention. The intention is to make sure that open source AI carries the same meaning and the same practical values that the open source software definition carries. You need to be able to understand. You need to be able to understand how the system has been built, its intention, etc., and you need to be able to learn from them, from the original developers, and build on top of them without having to reinvent the wheel or try to guess. Maybe this thing has been done this way, so I can improve it by doing this other thing. No, it's building on top, and this is where the building on top of what others have built. One of the basic tenets of open source. And but we do have spent, I mean, the community, and together with the also with the board, and we have reviewed a lot of the comments that we have received in the past, and we have clarified also that we do care about data. We do care about the availability of the training data. We do know that the training data is valuable to understand and study the AI systems, and we also want to acknowledge that there is different kind of data. There is data that can be reshared, and that would make sense to always have open, in terms of openly accessible and as open data, following the definition of maintained by the Open Knowledge Foundation. But there is also training data that is simply public, cannot be redistributed, and that is basically the whole internet. And where you have the right to crawl and build indexes on it. Like, this is one of the basic rights that Google has had as a search engine for forever, since its existence. And we need to continue to acknowledge the fact that while search engines can crawl the internet, they don't have the right to redistribute what they have crawled, but they have the right to offer the public some new and transformative actions and services. So this is the same thing. This is the concept of public training data that is publicly available. And then there is private data, which is another category of data for which you may have the right to train on, but you don't have the right to redistribute. And so a reminder that we're working within the constraints of the policies that the board has set as criteria to have a definition. The board asked us to work with the community to understand, to have a definition that is supported by a large coalition of individuals, organizations, and groups with globally representative, so a sample that is representative of global communities, but also represent various different interests. We're not just representing the interest of research and academia or individual developers or large corporations, small corporations, European corporations, or governments from other parts of the country, but it's the whole. We try to be as global and diverse as possible. The other constraints that the board set for us is that we need to provide real life examples. We can't really have a definition that defines theoretical models, theoretical systems that don't have any application in practice. It would be not acceptable by the board. And we also wanted to set a deadline, because it's a hard deadline, because otherwise, because the world needs this definition soon, and it's better to have something that is done rather than perfect. So what's next? In the next few months, we are working to resolve the comments as they come, and maybe release in the next couple of weeks, release candidate version, and then get a quick feedback with the top organizations, groups that have worked in the process to gain their endorsements, gather the last comments, and march towards stable version for all things open on October 27th. So we're at the stage where we are seeking the comments from individuals and organizational endorsements for comments and endorsements for the draft. So if you're ready to say, yeah, we're ready to endorse these principles, just send us an email, and you can email me or you can email Mer, who's been assisting our our project, you can get in touch with Nick. You can even go public on the forum already as you prefer. We want to have we need to start moving. Like, we are already at the first week of September, and we have only 6 weeks of time basically left before we finish the process. And yeah, we covered a lot of space, a lot of time. Over the months, we've been traveling quite a bit. We're trying to be presenting in many parts of the world, presenting and discussing with the community to make sure that there are the least amount of surprises by the time we issue the version 1 or stable version in things open. And I can also give you a preview. You see here in October there are 2 events scheduled. One is the All Things Open launch, but also there is a workshop that we're organizing for around specifically about the issue to discuss and understand better the space of data governance, distribution, etc. We'll have more details this coming week made available. And this is all the travel and the workshop that we're organizing in Paris is thanks to a grant, large grant given to us by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. So how to participate? You can definitely still email me or Mer, the preferred for the endorsements. You can also send public comments on discuss.opensource.org. You can definitely signal that you appreciate the stewardship and the role of the open source initiative in driving this process by becoming an OSI member. You can also donate as you become a member. And you can join these town halls that I realize this slide needs to be updated. They're happening now weekly at alternating time. 1 week is going to be at this time. One other week is going to be at 9 a.m. Central European time, so that the Asian community can join. And now, now we got time for Q&A. So a comment from YouTube: an OpenAI should prove that its training data is all legally licensed open source data. Right. So this is a very interesting question because it's a frequently asked question, actually, and so it's been debated for many months. The short answer is that legally licensed open source data is a different set of what you think it might be. And we may want to qualify. So think about the fact that Google Books, for example, has built a product built on legally acquired books, scanned and done object character recognition on it, and created a transformative work, and was sued, and then they won the lawsuit. Makes us think that the concept of training data, legally licensed open source data, is something that needs to be clarified. So it's a gut reaction that we all go towards, but we need to think about the consequences. It's a big topic. And that's why we're hosting that conference in Paris also. So, Joshua.
Hello, this is Josh Gay. So in the latest draft, I've been spending most of my time really trying to think through reading the definition from different viewpoints of users, especially a developer viewpoint. And so I've been really digging in and thinking about if I'm using Protobuf or TensorFlow or these other common frameworks and formats for AI models, what my worldview looks like. And one thing that really stands out to me is that generally speaking, we're gravitating towards these binary formats as what we understand as the model, right? And this is different than the abstract kind of approach to thinking about what an AI model is in general. It's in a sense broader than the AI model, which is more narrow, which is counterintuitive. You would think it would be just the opposite. And the reason why it's somewhat broader is because these binary formats allow you to do a lot of things that go perhaps beyond what you would normally think of as part of the AI model. But when you need to identify in your code base what is the model, you point to that file, right? That's the model. And so I think that there's going to be some gap between a lot of people's intuitive understanding of what the model is and what the intent of the model is by OS in this definition. I think that it would be helpful to put a little bit more in the definition on the online feedback forum for the latest definition. I added some comments specifically around this idea that you should be encouraging you to be explicit about saying that you should not use the AI model as a way to pass through, say, binary blobs or object code, right? And the reason why I sort of came to that conclusion is because I was looking at real examples where people were using things like protobuf and other in TensorFlow, and using variables that just store data effectively, right, as part of their training. So they're just storing verbatim blobs of information that are then used as part of the program. But it's that interaction, but it's stored in the model, right, from their perspective, from the user's perspective, and in the documentation. So I think it would be helpful to have a little bit more nuance in the definition to clarify that a trained model is not the same as merely storing files that can then be reused. That it should be about a little bit more detail on that, around that, just to help abuse of the open source AI definition. Prevent abuse.
I think, yeah. So I'm not sure I understand exactly. In fact, I was going to email you to have a conversation to clarify what you actually meant, and I'm glad I had you came for this and explain it via voice. So I'm still a little bit puzzled by the technical details here, but the general principle of the definition is that it must resist as much as possible the test of time, and it needs to set high-level principles at this stage. If you want to have a mental map to frame this, the intention here, the open source AI definition file, the way you see it linked in the chat, is the page that the FSF, the Free Software Foundation, hosts and calls "What is free software?" It's the basic principles that we want to have represented and in a view of the world of what needs to be achieved. That page has gone through multiple iterations. Like if you go below and you read it, the initial 4 freedoms were 3, and then a 4th was added, and wording has been changed on that page to clarify. But the principles, what is free software, those 3 and then later 4 freedoms have pretty much remained the same. What has changed and has evolved and derived from that is the open source definition, which is a sort of a checklist to evaluate in practical forms software packages used in order to be included in the FTP servers at the Debian project first, and then became the open source definition that are currently used, those 10 principles to evaluate the licenses and legal documents, right? We're probably trying to do the same thing here. The open source AI definition is the what is free software page, and then the new split document, the checklist, is more of those 10 points practical interpretation of in practice of what will have to happen for an AI system to be judged, evaluated, to be respecting the original intention written in the definition. So what I would recommend is that we spend a little bit more time collectively to think about the interpretation, right? Instead of making the first document longer, we could be spending a little bit more time to refine and review and we have more time. We don't have a set deadline to finish the checklist. We, make that document a little bit more rich. Bentley?
Yeah, I noticed this definition doesn't mention content generated by models under an open source license. This might be much of a bigger question, but is there a plan to address the content generated by an open source model, how that will be licensed, or is that part of a much bigger discussion?
That's a good question. So the jury's still out of whether what are the legal ramifications for that part. But definitely the definition does not touch that the same way that more or less the open source software definition doesn't say whether you can use like a C compiler to build malware or other things like that. Like it would be a separate conversation. Like there might be legal documents that say you cannot use this model, this AI system to create to infringe on someone else's copyright or to invent things that have already been invented or do other things. But that's something that will have to be evaluated by the legal community.
I have a question. Can you hear me, Stefano?
Yes.
Hi, Peter. By way of introduction, I'm a tech attorney. I've been practicing for 15 years, and for better or for worse, I've done a lot of work in the open source space. The one question I had is, at the top of the call, you went through the definition and you explained that there are 3 parts to the definition. Is it fair to state that the first 2 parts of that definition are have not generated any controversy versus the third?
Yeah. Well, not completely true. So the first 2 parts, you're meaning the model weights and parameters, and the second part would be the source code of. So there has been debate, and there will continue to be a little bit in the legal community. I would believe that the nature of the legal nature of the weights parameters is still being debated. Like in some legislations may not consider those subject to any exclusive right, and whether they should be considered under any IP law or other exclusive rights is to be debated. It's not ferocious debate, but it's an intellectually stimulating one. And on the code front, on the source code front, there is debate over whether the training code is actually should be strictly required or not, and there is a little bit of a push and pull. Like there have been, I've heard rumors about that requirement, strict requirement, as being a little bit too limiting. Yeah.
Got it. But just to clarify, the third component of the definition with respect to the training data is the most controversial. Is that correct?
Yeah. Correct. Yes, because yes, instinctively, all of us, like at the beginning of the process, everyone had the same thought. Data is where the weights come from. Some people use the term source, which is confusing. It's not source code in the same way, but it's where it comes from, right? That if without the data, you don't have the models, you don't have the parameters. And therefore, giving that requirement, all of the whole pipeline needs to be open source. But data is not source code, right? It doesn't fall under the same easy air quotes legal framework. It's a whole different beast, and realizing that became the big boulder that we had to navigate around. Find a way to navigate around.
Got it. Thank you. That's very helpful, Stefano. And I apologize. I have read a bunch of the comments on the various versions, but I obviously I don't have the full history here, and nobody knows this stuff better than yourself. Did OSI at any point consider using different words to describe models that would fit within this definition rather than open source as a way to resolve the complaints from various members of the community? Was that considered as an option?
That is a very awesome question. That is a very awesome question. It was one of the very first questions, is what we're going to call this thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on the left, but yes, unfortunately though, our hand was forced by the fact that open source AI as a term was already being used and even abused by some players, and I can be public about it because I've been public about it. Meta is one of the abuser of the term. They keep on referring to open source AI. So in order to safeguard open source, the term itself, we don't have another choice but to call it open source AI and work around it.
Thank you. That's very helpful context. That's all I have.
Yeah. I see Joshua typing. Are there any other questions from the Mozilla group or YouTube? Josh, I see you typing. Feel free to grab the mic.
Thanks. Yeah, it was just a sort of a follow-up. My point is that in principle, right, we know that when training a model, that it gets trained on code at times, right? Some of the data is code. Some of the data is object code, right? We know this because GitHub and other things are often used as the training data, right? And we know that that models sometimes make use of just verbatim storage instead of taking the data and trying to learn something from it. Sometimes you just save blobs of data in your model. All major models, model formats, TensorFlow and so forth, have facilities for doing exactly that function. TensorFlow saved models has a bunch of things. Protobuf has options. And I don't think, in principle, that is not what you're saying, right? You're not saying that training can be taking data like an object code blob, storing it in the model, and then when you build your AI system and you use the model, copy that data, load it into an executable area of memory and run it, right? Now, if I'm building consumer electronics, though, and I'm sending updates using my model, which is going to be an increasingly common paradigm, given the fact that we have just huge amounts of AI hardware being put out there, then it would be an attractive thing for me to update my platform via that AI model. And some of the things I'll put in there are, yes, they're technically trained. They're trained to say, here's a lookup table of what should be executed when the system initializes the AI system. And I think it would be good to just draw a bright line and say, no, that you can't just say that you can't just move something technically into what is the model and get around these principles that we're making clear.
Right.
That's the same thing as if you were to move that code elsewhere in your AI model.
Yeah, I see your point. Now it's more clear, right? But I would recommend that we go back to the reason why we put at the beginning of the document the definition of what is an AI system. Maybe that helps, because if we go back to the definition, what is the AI system that we are defining in this work, in this document? The AI system is anything that, given for implicit objectives, given an input, spits out an output. So whatever you call that, whether you package it in a binary that loads a blob and executes a virtual machine that executes something else, if what we're calling it here is what we're defining and what we need the corresponding, the preferred form to make modification of, is whatever that system is, however it's packaged, however it's shipped, whatever it ships. So when we go into the implementation, some reviewer who wants to, someone like I don't know, the Linux Foundation wants to, may want to have a requirement someday. Maybe we'll have a requirement that says we only accept AI systems in our projects that are open source AI, following the definition of the OSI. Then they will have a standard set for specifically that technology, the same way that they have the model openness framework now for the generative AI models. And in that place, they can put all of the requirements specifically for that technology to say, nope, that loading of that binary here is not a good thing. It's basically a workaround. It's not acceptable. Or we'll have to wait and see. I mean, another approach that we could have is to wait and see what if this threat that you have in mind is actually going to show up. It's not just a theoretical threat. If it will be showing up, we're thinking one of the tasks that we have to do by the launch is to really come up with suggest recommendations on how we're going to be monitoring the efficacy, the adoption of the open source AI definition, the availability in the reviewing of the existence of open source AI systems besides the initial ones that we have identified, which, by the way, are the ones released by the Eleuther AI, Allen AI Institute, LLM 360, and most likely TII. We're working to understand those better. So those are the ones that pass the open source AI definition right now.
Thank you.
I see. Yeah. Bentley?
So when a company modifies an open source AI model for commercial use, at what point does the modification become a derivative work subject to the original license? And would existing legal tests around open source licensing be sufficient to determine the AI model modifications and the derivative work aspect of it? Or do you foresee a whole new level of legal guidance needed with regards to these type of things?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Frankly, lots of it depends on what the what the models themselves are considered under laws. Because right now, yeah, well, it all depends on what contracts get built around them, and how those propagate between how the rights propagate between this new artifact, the trained weights, trained parameters, to derivatives. Yeah, not easy. So there is a conversation now happening on the license review mailing list, which is the community of volunteers who've been reviewing licenses, software licenses, and they've been asked to consider whether how to handle licenses and other legal documents that are not covering software, so the traditional space. So if you're interested in joining that conversation, I would highly recommend to join the license-review mailing list. All right, I see a question from Peter. Other nonprofits in OSI ecosystems like GNOME, Linux Foundation, FreeSoftware Foundation, etc., have any of them attempted to independently define open source AI or provided input to OSI about the OSI's definition? Oh, Peter, yeah, this is a great question because it allows us to explain a little bit more what the process has been. So this is not OSI's definition, the same way that the open source definition is not OSI's definition. We merely maintain it for the community. So we have worked from the very beginning with Linux Foundation, GNOME, FSF, and others, reached out to them and asked them to contribute to the definition. This definition is not written by us. It's written by a process held by a co-design process. It's a process designed to work for the people, with the people affected by the decision, not for them. So yes, all of these organizations mentioned, plus many others, Creative Commons, Eleuthero AI, Mozilla Foundation, many other groups have participated to the list. And we have somewhere on the website, opensource.org/deep dive, we have a list of the groups that have been, and the volunteers that have been included. All right. Are there any more questions? Okay, then. I'm going to call it a day, call it a week. Thanks, everyone. This has been very useful, very interesting for me. I hope it's been informative for you too. And I would, like Nick is saying on the chat, our discussions continue on our forum, discuss.opensource.org, and the license review working group is available. Peter, I'll stay on the chat here. I will send you the link where to join it. It's old school mailing list. Thank you, everyone.